How long does it take for an employer to make opinion about a new applicant? A lot of people believe that it takes 5 to 10 seconds and then the employer will have an opinion that affects the job interview outcome. This is completely wrong. It only takes milliseconds for an employer to create a feeling about if they like or dislike someone because of unconscious bias. During part 2 of the job interview course, we're going to focus on unconscious bias, explaining what unconscious bias is, the different types of biases that employers are aware and not aware of, and how they affect the recruitment process, and which biases are quite positive and can be used to help to influence the job interview outcome. As soon as you meet someone, you make an instant opinion about that person. This goes all the way back to when we were hunter and gatherers. If we came across a stranger, we'd want to know if they was a threat or not. The interview process is much the same. The interview perception formed at the interview start creates that all-important first impression, which then acts as a selection filter. The interviewer's involuntary opinion is filled with errors, prejudices and stereotypes. This automatic thinking comes from assumptions based on the interviewer's own experiences, values and beliefs. This is because the brain is designed to create shortcuts to reduce the time it takes to complete each task. It is this fast thinking part of the mind that uses generalizations to make rapid decisions. If, for example, the employer believes that an interviewee who is late for an interview will be a terrible worker, the interviewer will act from this viewpoint rather than challenge the status quo. As an example, imagine an employer walking downstairs to the reception area, and when they get to the reception area they see an obese, overweight applicant. So just pause there. When I described the obese, overweight applicant, did you imagine a female or male applicant? Now, I didn't reference if this person was male or female. There was no feminine or masculine used in the description. I just talked about a overweight, obese applicant. But because of your own experiences, your own values and your own beliefs, you would have imagined either a female or male job hunter. This is unconscious bias in play. People make opinions on how someone looks, their age, their body mass, if they're male or female, if they're beautiful or not. All these different unconscious biases affect the job interview process. Let's return to the obese applicant. An experiment was undertook to see if being obese or overweight affected the recruitment process. Hundreds of applications were sent off to hundreds of employers, all attached with a photograph of the applicant. Half the applications were sent with a photograph of an obese overweight applicant, and the other half sent with a photograph of an average weight individual. The experiment concluded to show that being overweight or obese affected the recruitment process, as the application forms for the job role were exactly the same. Biases can both be positive or negative, but each affect the interview's judgment of the applicant. This is because schemas influence what information is noticed and remembered. If the interviewer believes that a late candidate equals a poor performer, the interviewer will subconsciously search for evidence to reinforce this belief. So, imagine in a job interview where a candidate has been judged for being late. They are asked a question. Before answering, the applicant hesitates. They then detail a story relating to the job criteria referenced in the job interview question. Their answer highlights some key strengths and skills, but also shows some weaknesses and areas of development. The bias in this example, late candidate equals poor performer, creates a funnel where the interviewer, often without conscious awareness, filters the hesitation as a sign of lack of industry knowledge, and focuses more on the areas of development and weaknesses rather than the applicant's strength. There are three ways how an employer responds to a bias. If the employer believes in the prejudice, aware and don't care, they are more likely to go with that schema rather than to challenge it. This makes it hard for the applicant with that characteristic to create a positive impression. A racist, ageist or sexist interviewer, as an example, will be predisposed to conform with their bias even when the applicant is highly skilled, highly experienced and highly confident. The interviewer's beliefs are just too powerful to alter that perspective, even when the evidence has been presented proving the value of hiring such an applicant. They are of course people who don't have an automatic process for stimuli equals stereotype, and they won't be affected by that prejudice. At the interview start, even though initial opinion has already been formed, often based on a second bias or schema, the interview won't be affected by the first stereotypical belief, not aware and don't care. Bias is automatic. It can't be stopped. It simply pops into your mind. For example, the stereotype, women can't perform male roles, can be the initial thought as an employer meets a new applicant, even if the employer doesn't consciously believe the stereotype to be true. They grew up in an environment where the stereotype was regularly expressed. This automatic response to seeing a stimuli is just too powerful. The stereotype appears without warning. To counter this automatic process, an interviewer can try to consciously override it by searching for evidence that disproves the belief. Janice, our best performer, is female and works in a stereotypical male role. This is the conscious mind, the slow analytical part of the brain in play, aware and care. But this conscious overriding of automatic thinking is harder to complete when stressed or tired. As an example, towards the end of the day of a full day of interviewing candidates. But the applicant can't rely on the interviewer self-analysing their own processes when a job offer is at stake. The barrier here though is that it's very hard for an applicant to recognise when an employer is influenced by an unconscious bias. Language is a clue, as are facial expressions. Imagine a male named Alex, as Alex can be a male or a female name. Alex arrives for a traditional feminine role job interview. Upon arrival, the interviewer may state, "Oh, I was expecting a female," while expressing a disgust facial expression. This combination could indicate a negative bias towards hiring a male applicant for this traditional female role. Remember, for a large number of interviewers, their unconscious bias is unintended. When interviewees can identify an employer's bias, they can reframe the statement that gave away the prejudiced thought. Alex, as an example, could reply with, "A lot of employers think that I may be female, as my application form shows I have a caring and empathetic nature," especially in this example where these two qualities are required job criteria. Reframing is a technique used to create a new perspective without being confrontational, and we'll talk about reframing a little bit later on in this course. Pre-job interview opinions affect the recruitment process. Employers more than ever before are checking the social media feed of applicants before interviewing them. Imagine two people applying for the same position. The employer searches for them on social media. One person posts pictures about taking their dog for a walk, eating in restaurants, drinking in bars and spending time with family and friends. But the second applicant has set up their social media to show a high level of sector knowledge and experience. They post about industry insights, how globalization is affecting their particular sector. They give information, advice and guidance to other people working in the same line of work. The employer, from reading their social media feed, will have a pre-interview opinion which acts as the halo effect. The halo effect is an effect that means the employer will want you to do well because they believe you are the most suitable person for that position. The horns effect is the opposite effect. If an employer for some reason has a dislike to an individual before meeting them, based on any number of factors, they'll filter their interview questions in a negative way. What this means is, using your job application form, your social media feed, and for internal promotions, getting a good reputation from your line managers is often key to having a successful job interview. If an interviewer or employee believes that you're going to be a benefit to their organisation, they're going to want you to do well in the job interview. Whereas they think you're going to have a bad influence on the organisation, they're not going to filter your answers in a way that sees you as the best particular candidate. Humans gravitate towards people they believe are similar to themselves. When recruiting a new team member, an interviewer will often have a natural, stronger preference for an applicant who they feel is the right fit for the organisation. The right fit, when the infinity bias is in operation, is the interviewer having a stronger desire to recruit an applicant who they see as having similar personality, attitude, value or belief as themselves. So an applicant mentioning any type of commonality at the interview start can increase likability. Similarity is so powerful even if the employee believes they have a similar values as the candidate. Gained as an example from the applicant's social media feed, creates a post-interview opinion, the halo effect. Similarity can include attending the same university, working for the same employer, or even having the same sounding name. The "what is beautiful is good" stereotype shows that the more physically attractive an applicant is, the more they are perceived to be job worthy, even for job roles that don't require a beautiful employee, i.e. manufacturing or administration. To test the attractiveness bias, the same average level applications were graded for a potential job role. Half the applications had attached to them a photograph of an attractive applicant, and the other half were sent without a picture. The experiment concluded that the additional attractive photograph assisted those candidates in gaining a job interview invitation. Research has shown how keeping your chin up, arching your back, open posture, smiling, direct eye contact, nice skin, wearing clothes that suit your body type, and generally being nice all increase attractiveness. If you met yourself for the very first time, what would your opinion be? Task time. For this task, you need honest reflection. You're going to make 3 lists. The first list is a list of all your physical traits. So as an example, you can write down if you're tall or small. You can write down if you walk with confidence or does your posture show anxiety. What is the tonality of your voice like? Does it give off the impression of authority or someone who is weak? Do you wear clothes that are tight-fitting or loose? Does the colour of your outfit for your job interview reflect your personality? Do you have facial tattoos? Wear bright lipstick? Are you muscular or thin? Do you have bright or dark hair? So write down a list of all your physical traits, the things the employee will see as soon as they meet you. Next to each of those traits on the second list, I want you to write down if that trait is positive or negative from the employee's perspective, remembering that all employers have their own opinions. But for the ones that are often seen as being negative, you need to write down on your third list a way that you can reframe why that trait is how it is. As an example of this, one of my friends has facial tattoos. He's had facial tattoos for the last 10 or 15 years. So when he goes to job interviews, the employee rarely mentions his tattoo, but he often brings it up himself, saying that my facial tattoos are a part of who I am, my personality, because I'm an innovative and creative person and I wear that creativity on my face. Now he applies for jobs in the media sector where they're looking for creative and innovative people. So that answer represents who he is and what he can bring to that organisation. So what you need to do is think about your physical traits, if they're seen as positive or negative, and then for any negative traits you need to think of a way you can reframe why you have that trait or how that trait is useful in a new organisation. The evidence states that it's impossible for each applicant to receive a fair interview, as candidates are judged differently by the interviewers at the subconscious level. This could be the difference between an interviewer who sees commonality with themselves and the interviewee, subconsciously encouraging a candidate to give a high-scoring answer, or due to an interviewer's negative projection, the interviewer may hear the applicant's answers less favourably than the evidence suggests they actually are, resulting in low scoring interview answers. So career professionals therefore need to understand how they are initially viewed by the applicant. In part 2 of the job interview course, we discuss unconscious bias. We looked at positive and negative unconscious bias and what applicants can do to make themselves have the best possible opportunity. The halo effect, for example, is easy to implement by having positive sector-related information on your social media feed, or maybe by getting a manager to give you a positive reference. Or another way to have the halo effect is to ensure your unique selling point, what you can bring to the organisation, is very clear on your application form. We also know that being attractive sets a positive precedence at the beginning of a job interview, but for high skill jobs, the research shows that being attractive doesn't always have a positive influence. That is because the analytical process of a structured job interview means you have to meet the job criteria. So being attractive creates a good start because we see attractive people and presume positive things about those individuals. But to get a high skill job, you need to meet the job criteria. Having an affinity with the employer is a very positive thing because people like people who are like them. And if you get the employer to believe that you like the employer, they're more likely to like you in return. But we also know that some people are sexist, racist or ageist. And those stereotypes and prejudice has a massive negative effect on a job interview outcome. Sometimes you can reframe situations or people's opinions, and we'll talk about reframing a little bit later on in the course, but with an aware and don't care employer, it can be quite hard to change their negative opinion of a person with a certain stereotype. But with someone who has an aware and care attitude, they may have a negative opinion that is in their subconscious mind, but when they recognize that negative opinion, they'll do something about it. Just like in the example of the male applying for a feminine role. And we also have the third type of employer, aware and don't care, who doesn't have an opinion against a certain stimuli, as an example on someone's age, but might have an opinion on a second stimuli, as an example someone's race or someone's gender.